Thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here today. Thank you for the great introduction. This topic is, as you all know, something that's very relevant. I don't want kids to think or teens to think that bullying just started today. I mean, how many parents here, raise your hand if you were ever bullied when you were a kid or a teen? Yeah, so I think a lot of times we forget as kids that your parents were once middle schoolers and high schoolers as well. So when I'm talking today, I'm gonna, since this session includes kids, I'm gonna really talk to parents and kids, and I'm gonna have you guys do some exercises together or just have some discussions. So this is really informal. I would love for you guys to interact. If you have questions that are really important when I'm talking about a certain point, feel free to raise your hand. If you wanna save it till the end, we will have a Q&A at the end. Sound good? Okay, so as Mary Jo, correct? Okay, introduced me, I work with girls full-time, and I also run a foundation for girls called the Grace by Grit Foundation. And this is all based out of San Diego, but my life coaching and personal development coaching I do virtually. So I have girls all over the country and even in Europe, which I've been doing for 10 years. I absolutely love it. I don't have kids yet, so maybe that's why I love it so much. But I also work with a lot of parents, obviously, who have kids and they're wanting their girls to learn more self-awareness and make changes in their lives. And the foundation, the Grace by Grit Foundation, is a foundation that teaches girls about grit. Grit is a big word these days. We hold events across the country for middle school and high school girls and their one-day conferences where girls get to hear speakers and do activities that really show them how to build grit and then take that away and put that into their lives. And then we also do scholarships. So we give away about $50,000 in scholarships per year to girls pursuing sports at the Division II or III level in college. So just keep that in mind. So busy, but my life is teen girls and I love it. I will speak to boys as well, teen boys. I don't see any boys here tonight except for the dads or men. But the relational bullying, or what we call emotional bullying, is more prevalent in girls. But you can relate the same information if you have a son. Sound good? Okay. So the agenda, just so you guys all know what we're gonna do tonight, is we're gonna understand what bullying is. We're gonna talk about the different types of bullying. The most common type, which is what we're gonna focus on tonight. We're gonna learn how to handle relational aggression as a parent, and that's the most common type, is their relational aggression. We're gonna talk about why does it happen. That's really my passion, is bullying's not gonna really go away. I mean, we can have different tools to handle it, but I really want you guys to start to learn why it happens. And then how to prevent it. Because then I feel like you feel empowered that you're taking action to do something about it. My goals for you as parents and kids is to leave here having a better understanding and awareness so you can take action in your lives and your kids' lives. And you can make changes. That's what I feel. There's so many people who go to these talks and you learn so much. I want you to take what you've learned tonight and actually use it, even if it's one thing. So keep that in mind. And then I want you to walk away with tools, tangible tools, to best support you as a parent and your child. So that's the agenda and the goals. Just keep that in mind. Okay. Here's a picture of what typical bullying looks like. If you were to talk about it, or what you see in movies or comic strips, it has a bigger, male or female picking on a littler guy. Maybe I want to steal your lunch money. A lot of it can be physical abuse, or what you see in movies as far as what goes on behind on the playground. Now, this type of bullying still does exist, but it's not the common type anymore. So the parents that raised their hands earlier, how many of you had this type of bullying happen to you? No? Sort of? How many of you were the bully if you raised your hand as a parent? How many of you were stealing lunch money? So just to, when you hear the word bullying, I just want you to really think about it. This is, what we tend to still think of firsthand, but I want us to go deeper than this, okay? So here's all the different types of bullying, and we're going to kind of walk through this, and then we're going to be focusing mostly on the emotional and the cyberbullying. So the physical bullying, we just saw a picture of hitting, kicking, pushing, punching, hurting, slapping. Physical bullying is actually more common in middle school because middle schoolers react really quickly without thinking, and so that's typically where you still see some of the physical bullying. Emotional bullying is what is, like I said in the beginning, the most common. spreading rumors, leaving people out, gossiping, harming someone's reputation, and ignoring. And this, for all the kids here, bullying still happens when you're an adult. So a lot of parents are going to learn this as well. It doesn't just end after high school or college. So I want you to take this into your friendships as adults today as well. Verbal, name-calling, threatening, hurtful or nasty comments, racial slurs, and rude remarks. Most of the time, verbal bullying isn't as common because people don't have the guts to say it. So we relate to emotional, hey, I'm gonna spread a rumor about this girl so I don't have to say it to her face. And that is the type of bullying that makes you feel powerful because you're not actually saying it to the person. Does that make sense? Especially with technology, right? Because nowadays kids can spread rumors about someone without even seeing them. And it can be on social media, it can be on all these other platforms that teens use. So that verbal bullying really leads into the emotional bullying because the emotional part is what really makes girls feel the effects of being bullied. And then cyberbullying, like I just said, kind of goes into the verbal and emotional. It's just using the internet or your phones or technology to bully. Again, this wasn't really existing back when I was in school or parents, like you said. So this is a whole new ballgame. And I'm sure as parents, a lot of you feel really overwhelmed with technology and how it's influencing your kid's life. I look at technology as a really positive thing as long as this isn't happening. And as a parent, this is up to you to find those boundaries because kids are very smart. They will find a way. Any questions on the different types of bullying? Do you guys, anyone have examples of when they were bullied or were a bully of anything that related to this? Parents that raised their hands in the beginning that you experienced, you guys said no physical. Does anyone want to share when you were bullied, what happened, or just give a category?
Mine was verbal.
Verbal? Okay, verbal in the back too?
Ignoring.
Oh, ignoring, okay. And is that something, having that happen to you, do you remember it? I mean, obviously you're an adult now, it still is fresh in your mind in a sense, right? Okay, so that's what's really important about bullying is the effects last a long time. You can ask certain women, why are you afraid of this or what happened? And usually they'll say, well, back in 7th grade, there was a text message sent out that blah, 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 and they're 35 now, but it still has an effect on their self-esteem and how they approach women or just their life in general. So with kids, younger kids these days, that's what we don't want to happen. We don't want bullying to affect your life in the future, unless you learn from it, which is what we're going to talk about tonight. Okay, moving on. So the essential components of bullying are two-part. It is intentional. Okay, so it is actually with someone saying, I'm going to do this, I'm being intentional about starting this rumor. It's not like they just randomly made a mistake. It has to be intentional, and then it's hurtful. Okay, and I know that we don't want to admit that our kids can do this, but everybody probably can relate that your kids to you have been hurtful, right, or intentional, especially going into the teenage years. Okay, so those are the two essential components of bullying, simple. Now here's where it gets tricky. This is an iceberg. How many of you guys have seen Titanic? Anyone love Leonardo DiCaprio? He was my crush in high school. So the iceberg, like in the movie, you only see the tip, right? And it was almost too late. Just like in bullying, the visible aggression is what's not as common, but that's what everyone sees. If I show up the next day to school and I have a black eye, and I say, well, Mary Jo punched me, it's pretty obvious. And that is usually what teachers can control because they see it. They'll see us fighting in the schoolyard or examples that you've seen. The name calling or face-to-face is more visible. So if you hear girls fighting or calling names, it's really present, right? You can hear it, teachers can get involved. I heard you say this. But the tip of the iceberg is where the least amount of bullying occurs these days. It's what's underneath. And this is why it's so tricky for parents because most of the bullying these days goes under the radar. Right past you. That's why you're here. So rumor spreading, gossip, body language. I mean, I don't know if any of you guys as adults have been to corporate lectures about how your body language affects people. But if a girl is sitting there and the whole group of girls turns their back to them, that is so powerful. That tells them they're not included, they're not liked. And again, this is at a stage where your daughters or sons are developing their self-esteem. right? So it's not like today where if someone does that, I'm like, okay, I guess they don't like me and I can walk away. Not when you're in middle school and high school, right? Your whole world is school. So underneath, or the physical exclusion, if you get up and move away and not sit with it. It's always usually the lunchroom situation, right? There's all these girls and there's one girl sitting at the table by herself. So the verbal exclusion and the nonverbal exclusion is the part that I'm gonna focus on tonight, because that's really, really, really what's happening. Do you guys agree? Do you guys think that's becoming more, you guys hear more about that relational aggression, emotional, where you don't even see it, but it's happening, and once you almost see it when it's too late. When you're like, oh my gosh, look at this string of text messages these girls sent. How did I miss this? Versus if that happened in the classroom and I'm yelling at you back and forth. Okay, so it's gonna take you to be a more proactive and involved parent, not saying you guys already are, but with technology and kids are growing up way faster these days, you have to be on top of it. All right, so the number one type of bullying is relational aggression, or some people call it emotional aggression. Here are some examples, and there's a lot, but I wanted to outline these because sometimes you don't even think it's bullying. Talking badly about others, backstabbing one another, making fun of others for who they are, the way they dress, or how they look, excluding and ostracizing others, leaving hurtful or mean messages on cell phones, social media, desks, and lockers, cyberbullying or shaming others online. Again, this is the new, I call it being chicken way of bullying, because you're behind a computer screen. Intimidating others, using peer pressure to get others to participate in bullying. Don't worry, we will talk about Mean Girls tonight as an example, so that's a big one in that movie. Peer pressure, because you don't want to upset the bully or the popular girl. Establishing rules for anyone who wants to be a part of the social group. Right? That's more common for girls than for guys. Guys bond over just kind of hanging out, playing sports together. They're emotionally developing a little bit slower. Not to offend any guys, that's just the way it is. But all kids, remember, your brain doesn't fully develop till you're 25. So the frontal cortex, which is where you learn how to make decisions, where you can sit back and say, this is probably not the right decision, problem solving. Kids don't have it yet, right? So as parents, we're thinking, well, why would you do that? Didn't you think that through? Unless they have the support or tools or they're not thinking that way yet. They literally don't have the capacity. So that's why sometimes as adults it's frustrating, because you think, why doesn't this make sense to you? Well, because the frontal part of their cortex is just in the beginning stages, and guys are a little further behind in that. Crazy, huh? And that's why when parents will say, oh, she's just acting like a teenager. I'm like, she is a teenager. Like, you can't expect your kids to bypass this time in their life. It's the most important. They're growing the most. It's so awkward for them. They're trying so hard with their problem solving. They just don't have all the tools yet, which is why when you know better, I feel like you can do better. Sorry, I keep staring at you as the man, but that's not like to isolate you. I'm just looking right there. Okay, forming cliques is a big one for girls. Spreading rumors or engaging in gossip. And those are some examples. Let me just go back. Okay, so let's put this list up again. So there's a lot, right? There's a lot of different ways you can do this. Again, going back to the two main points of what bullying entails, it's hurtful and it's intentional. Okay? So any of these are coming from a place of, I'm going to be intentional about doing this. I'm going to intentionally talk bad about this person. Most of the time, which we'll get to, it's because they want to feel better about themselves, or it's like a power struggle within themselves, but it's still intentional and it's still hurtful. Okay, so it's really important for all of these to recognize. Some of it you may think, well, it's not that big of a deal, which, you can label these in a way of, oh, this one's worse than this one, but you don't know how that feels to the person who it's happening to. If someone feels that, they really like being included in a group and then they're excluded, that can feel like their whole world is over. For me, I was really outgoing. I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna make new friends. But that's personality-wise, every kid is so different. So any of these happening is a huge deal for them. Okay, so here's an example Typical girls gossiping on their cell phones, different than when we were kids. It was just more gossiping, didn't have this technology piece to emphasize it, and the other girls left out. Now, this happens where girls will actually be doing this, looking back at the girl, making sure she sees them. Okay, that's really mean girls, but sometimes for girls, it is so important to be included socially that they will do this even if they don't agree. Okay? So signs to look out for. If your child is being bullied, they feel rejected, socially inept, inadequate, unattractive, and unlikable. If these words are coming out of their mouth, this is a sign they may be experiencing some bullying. It's not for them, well, nothing's really happening because I'm not getting beat up. It doesn't have to be physical, remember. They could be like, wow, I'm feeling really rejected because suddenly my friends aren't inviting me places, or I'm the only one not sitting at the lunch table anymore. They can suffer from depression. Depression in kids and teens is on the rise, and a lot of it I feel like it's because they're depressing their feelings and they're trying not to actually deal with what they're actually feeling. And again, without the frontal cortex development, they don't know how to process what they're feeling. Okay, so that's where it's really important to make sure you as a parent have that open communication, or they have other adults in their lives that they can talk to. They develop low self-esteem. When you're young, your self-esteem is really based on what other people think about you. You haven't had a lot of life experience yet to realize that doesn't really matter. My self-esteem these days is based on what I think about me, but that's taken me 36 years to get to. So if you notice your kid's self-esteem is dropping, especially you have kids who are bubbly and confident, and they start getting bullied or left out, and they just start, shying away, and their whole personality changes. That's not what we want, because you want them to be themselves. Experience eating and sleeping disorders. This is big these days. A lot of times girls can't sleep, or they feel so anxious because they're overthinking this, or if they're on their phone at night and seeing these text messages, I would recommend, and all the kids here are not gonna like this, but I would recommend taking your child's phone when they go to bed. Most of them are up all night looking at it underneath the pillow. Unless they're 16 and driving, I recommend to all my clients' parents that the phone is with you or downstairs charging. They do not need it. They will tell you they need it for homework, for checking this. Once they're in bed, they do not need it, because it's going to actually affect them overthinking if they are being bullied. They're gonna look back on Instagram, oh, I wasn't tagged, or this didn't get a like. So be careful with that for sleep. And then eating, even though it's very common for girls to not eat or just develop eating disorders more than guys, it's actually both this way. If you see your child not having the same hunger, or just like, that means they're having anxiety or depression, and that can result in changing of eating patterns. They can suffer academically. This is really, really, really probably the number one you'll see first, is because when they are feeling good in school and they're feeling like they're supported and they're happy, most kids are gonna try better academically. They're still gonna raise their hand, not afraid to look stupid. So academics, if you see a big slide starting, it's typically something else is happening. You can ask your child, are you understanding math? Obviously, it's gonna take some questioning, but don't be surprised if academic sliding is related to bullying. For me, my math grade was not because of bullying, I just was not good at math. So again, as a parent, that's up to you to decide, but just know it's a good question to ask. And then they're struggling to make healthy friendships. The transition from middle school to high school, even elementary school to middle school, making friends, elementary school, you're kind of friends because your parents are friends, you're just in the same class. Middle school starts to be that, oh, I kind of like you, but now I'm becoming cooler, so I don't want to be friends with you anymore. Then high school is where the groups all form. If you feel that your child has had this strong group of friends and suddenly they don't have that anymore, or they've lost this social aspect of their life, usually it's a sign that something is emotionally happening from a bullying standpoint. So as a parent, how many of you love being parents? Yay! It is the greatest job in the world, also the hardest. First step, any of this starts happening, any of these signs, you need to talk to your child, okay? This I know sounds so simple, but the second part is the most important. Talking to them looks like this. Hey, Mary Jo, how are you feeling? I've noticed you've been, really anxious lately, or maybe not use that word. You've been nervous lately. listen then. Okay, so most parents, we want to talk and talk and talk and talk, which is great. But the key component is for you to listen. You have to actually even go past the awkward silence where your kid's just sitting there and you're like, okay. That's where the magic happens. Give them time. So just talking to your child, listening, and working on open-ended questions. Because if you ask a question yes or no, you're going to get yes or no. So here's the takeaway part. Here's what I want you to do after you ask your child, you seem different, is everything okay? Open-ended questions. Here's the next part you can go to as a parent if you notice your kid is struggling or dealing with relational bullying. Empathy is the first. I call them the 3 E's. It's easy to remember. Empowerment and engagement. First up, empathy. Have kids who are here, have you guys been learning about empathy in school a lot more? Sort of. I know there's some big words here, so I always like to break it down because people will be like, be empathetic, and kids are like, great, I don't know what that is. So we're going to talk about empathy versus sympathy. It's a big confusion for kids. So empathy isn't feeling sorry for someone, and as a parent, you're not feeling sorry for your kid, okay? Because that's going to show them that you're saying, gosh, I don't know if you can handle this on your own. I feel sorry for you that you're going through this. Empathy is saying, I know where you're coming from. I've been there. So you're putting yourself in their shoes. You're feeling with them, you're not feeling for them. Okay, sympathy is more, like I said, an act of commiseration, and you're acknowledging, but then you're kind of just wallowing in that. Okay, so even as a friend, if you have a friend, girls who are here, who says, I'm having a hard time with this, empathizing with them would say, I'm sorry to hear that, tell me more. And then if they say something you've experienced, you're like, I've had that experience too. Versus, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, that sucks, what are you gonna do? Or, making them feel worse about it, that's more sympathy. Empathizing with your child is going to make them feel empowered because it makes them feel heard, it makes them feel seen, and especially if you empathize with them in a way that you've been in their shoes. Again, I know girls hate to hear when the parent's like, I was once your age. They're like, oh my gosh, you're such a dork, mom, you were never a teenager. But if you can talk to them in feelings, or like I said in the beginning, bullying still happens to your parents, to adults. So you can give them examples. In my day-to-day life, Gloria, my daughter, I sometimes feel the same way. I know what that feels like. Okay, you can relate in that way, not just going back to when you were a teen, because they think you're ancient dinosaurs and can't relate. Right? It's all funny because it comes full circle when all your kids are, how old are most of the girls here? 10, 11, 12? 14? Older, okay. 11? I always say, when you're in your 20s, which is way far away, you'll look back and look at your parents and be like, wow, you actually knew so much. But that doesn't happen for 10 years. So parents, you have to be very, very patient. So until then, you can empathize. Does anyone have any examples of empathy that they've used with their child or that you've learned, since empathy is a big topic right now? Not all at once. Another part of empathy is not making assumptions. Okay, so if your child's talking, you don't want to jump in and make an assumption for them. So empathizing is relating to them, not feeling for them. Did you have a question? No? Okay. Asking open-ended questions I mentioned. And part of the healing process is for your child to feel their feelings, which is part of empathy. Okay, you're not saying it's bad to feel this way. We're going to feel this way, and I'm going to relate to you, and then we're going to make an action plan. Okay, questions on empathy? Some people, as parents, to note, have a harder time being empathetic. So if you have a relationship with mom and dad as a kid, maybe determine who's the more empathetic one, and then who can step in for empowerment. So this is just an example of being empathetic. I see you, I've been there, maybe in a different experience, but I know what you're going through. So empowerment is another key word, even in my bio, girl empowerment, yay. It's my favorite thing, but I also feel like the word is overused. And so I'm going to kind of explain it in a different way today for parents to empower your kids. So how many parents struggle with wanting to save your kids or make them feel empowered by doing it for them? If you know your kid was being bullied or a mean girl was, you just are like, I'm going in there, and Mary Jo, we are having a talk. right? Most parents, it's really hard to see your kid suffer. And especially when they're young enough that they don't, again, have the tools to maybe stand up for themselves yet, or they're afraid to. So empowerment isn't fixing your child. Empowerment isn't rescuing your child. When you rescue your child, or you're the helicopter parent, or what do they call it these days? There's another word. Velcro, I like that one. Where you go, I go. When you take that opportunity away, you are making your child feel powerless, which is the opposite of feeling empowered. Now, how many of you parents here feel that being a good parent, or when you have like a great day with your kid, makes you feel empowered as a parent? Like, yeah, I'm doing this right. But that's not all the time because your kid's telling you that. Right? It's something that you may see, oh, they're actually listening to me. It's something usually that isn't said from your kid. Same thing with when you empower them. It's not just you saying, here's what we're going to do. Here's the plan. It's being a part of that, but they're the ones leading the way. So if your kid is being bullied, Mary Jo's been mean to me, my mom's going to say, I empathize with you. I've been there. What do you think a good plan is? What do you want to do about this? Right? Put it into their court. If they're like, well, I don't know, she's so mean. Yeah, that is really mean. So what's something that we can come up with together? Try your best to not jump in even after one question. If they say, I don't know, what do you think? Okay, well, here's what we're gonna do. Because we're parents, we're fixers, right? Keep it open for them. They're developing in their brain. This is their chance to problem solve. They may come up with the, most extravagant idea, and you will listen and then say, okay, let's take part of that, and what about this? But let them lead the way. It doesn't mean you're telling them whatever their answer is what you're going to agree with. You're still the parent. The other part of empowerment is if you make a plan together and then you tell them, okay, here's the plan that we made together. I'm so proud of you. Here's your part and here's my part. Your part's really going to be supporting them, and then if something does, obviously bullying can go more extreme. If you do feel like your child's in danger or their safety's in danger, then heck yeah, you're getting involved. So you make that very clear to them. Here's the plan. If any of XYZ happens, this plan goes out the window. Just so so your child feels like you have their back, but you want to give them the opportunity to come up with the plan first. Does that make sense? It's going to make you feel like you're out of control as a parent. Which is, again, the worst feeling. But your kid's feeling that way, right? So you're empowering them to take those steps. Empowering as a parent, keep your kids involved in things that make them feel strong and build their self-confidence. Sports, activities. Make them, recognize the things that they're doing that make them feel good about themselves. Friends that make them feel good about themselves, yes, we will hang out with them more. If you go to basketball practice and you come home and they just automatically seem stronger, that's where they're going to spend more time, right? So you need to help them recognize their strengths in the activities and everything they're doing, because that's how they're building their confidence. And you can use those analogies when you're being empathetic with them, okay? Because that's a good way to relate. If you say, well, if you got knocked down in basketball, what are you going to do? Just stay knocked down? No, we're going to come up with a plan. We're going to get stronger. So you can use the analogies. Dads love this. Typically, if you have daughters who play sports, if you played sports, great way to empathize. So different way of seeing empowerment, right? You're empowering your child because they're empowering themselves and you're supporting them. Does that make sense? Okay. So big part of empowerment is self-awareness. The number one thing I work on with girls is developing their self-awareness. And I always ask girls, do you know what self-awareness is? And they say, it's my awareness of self. Love it when they define it with the definition. I'm like, good call. So it's a bigger term again, but simply it's just knowing yourself. And your whole teenage years are getting to know yourself. That's what it's all about. So when you are empowered, you can be more self-aware. You're able to understand yourself. Sometimes with bullying, you may not know, but something you're doing is maybe causing the bullying, right? So when you know yourself better, you can identify and manage your emotions. Usually with bullying, unless it's really extreme, both people kind of play a part. You can communicate openly. A lot of girls are so afraid of actually just having a conversation and saying, you hurt my feelings, that they go through 18 other steps, starting the rumor, getting people on their side, versus just having the actual conversation. But you have to know yourself and feel confident in your abilities in order to do that. So it's vital, like I said before, to examine your own contribution to the dynamics of a friendship, right? Girls can be very, very sneaky, more than guys. Guys will be like, yeah, he was, mean, so I punched him. It's pretty much what you see is what you get. Girls, you have to make sure that you're getting the whole story. It's okay to hold your daughter accountable. Was there something that you did? Is there something that maybe, are you acting like you do with your brother sometimes, where you're ignoring him, right? A lot of bullying is learned from your siblings, not in a bad way, but that's where they tend to be most open at home with siblings. And recognizing, again, feeling empowered, that you really can only change your own behavior. So the more that you can teach your daughter or son that they're in control of only them, which is knowing yourself and feeling empowered, then they're gonna feel a lot more confident, right? So don't spend too much time focusing on the actual bully. Bring it back to what you can control, which is you and your child. And then it's a great chance for self-reflection, right? So what did you learn from this? I have a lot of girls who were bullied in elementary school, and they will sit in middle school and say, oh, well, yeah, I remember in 4th grade, right? So having self-awareness is a great chance to reflect because you can already learn from your past experiences.
Question.
Yes?
So when you talk about communicating, with the bully,
Uh-huh.
that idea, but I feel like a lot of times the bully doesn't want to own up to it, and they'll
Yeah.
just be like, oh, I think everything's fine.
Totally.
And then what do you do?
So great question. So if you've taken the first step and tried to communicate and the bully doesn't want to have anything to do with it, then you've taken your part. You've done everything to initiate the conversation. You've been brave. They're not meeting you. That's where you are like, I can't control them. I'm going to focus my energy here. If they do bully you again, you have more maybe confidence to stand up for yourself, but you being the bigger person is that first time, and then you stop. It's like, they're not going to change. Yes?
A common thing that happened once to my daughter in was 1st grade is that, basically, eventually we had to tell the teacher what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And it only got a lot worse.
Mm-hmm.
And then the parent was misinformed. And anyway, long story short, sometimes my daughter would say, oh, I don't want, to be more of a target.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want it to get worse. So
Yes.
that's when you just kind of have that plan together and
Mm-hmm.
say, well, this is what you're going to do, but if this happens, then that's when
Yes.
maybe we have a meeting with the teacher.
Exactly. As long as you make a plan and tell your daughter who, if you're going to get involved, like let's say the teacher's going to get involved, they know, okay, first step, the plan is they're going to try to talk to this person. If that doesn't work, just sometimes parents will go behind their kid's back because they're the parent and they'll already talk to the teacher without the kids knowing. And that's sometimes where it's like, oh, well, I heard your mom went and talked to the teacher. And the kids are like, oh, mom. They don't know. So it's really important to make sure that plan, you're on the same page about it. Mm-hmm.
And then at what point, do you let the teacher know? Because there was one situation where I let the teacher know right away, and anyway, it wasn't very helpful. Then another year, I waited a very long time so my daughter could, really learn to problem solve.
Mm-hmm.
And then the bully tattled on my daughter and kind of lied and said she was mean, and
Hmm.
my daughter got in trouble.
Hmm.
She was kind of actually being assertive and sticking up for herself.
Mhm.
It was just one of those situations where, sometimes the bullies lie.
Yes.
And it's happened.
Yes, which we'll get to that whole part of why people are bullies in the first place, which a lot of it's based on lies because they're, having their own issues. 1st grade this was?
It was 1st grade and then 2nd grade.
So 1st and 2nd grade is pretty young for kids to deal with things on their own. I think parents need to be more involved at that stage. Teachers can be helpful, and it depends on how they handle it. Teachers are also taught different curriculums on how to handle bullying these days. So some schools are really proactive. I think it just depends, but I would say elementary school, parents' involvement should be way higher than middle school and high school. Now you also have to look at your daughter got in trouble and what was the consequence.
She
Okay.
The teacher kind of like, just was really upset. But I
Mhm.
think like sometimes, especially kind of like the small communities,
Mhm.
parents know the teacher.
Yeah.
Or the teacher knows that family, so it's almost like they believe.
Yeah.
It was just one of those weird dynamics.
Yeah.
You know, but I mean, my daughter didn't really get in trouble, but she got talked to, and
Mhm.
that was a big deal. Like, she
Got
was
it.
mortified.
Because the teacher talked to her and she's like never in trouble type of girl.
And she's like, I never was mean to her. She
Mhm.
was with me for 5 months.
Yeah.
Some of those encouragement.
Yes. And I think that's a great learning opportunity for her. Again, kids hate when you say that. This is a great learning opportunity. But for her to recognize that it's not always going to go your way, even when you do the right thing. And that's a lot of times when you stand up to a bully or when you're the bigger person, it doesn't always mean that life's butterflies and rainbows anymore. It usually doesn't. But you weigh, was it worth her getting talked to and having her stand up for herself versus the opposite of her getting bullied and having it continue as far as, being in first grade?
Sorry, I mean, it was worth like trying to address it for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think it's just, you have to like weigh the effect on your daughter, and obviously like what grade is she in now?
She's in 3rd, and she is like an upstander, sticks up for the
Good, okay. So that may have like actually taught her that. I mean, the worst case scenario that a teacher talks to her, and I know it's hard because some girls really love approval. Most women, we want people's approval. So a teacher talking to you is like the ultimate, I did something wrong. That's also teaching her, you having that teaching moment of saying, it's okay. Some adults are not always going to agree with what you do, and the teacher was just trying to do her best. All you can do is control you and make it seem like it's okay for her to have been talked to by the teacher. Where some kids are just talked to by the teacher all the time. Okay, so the last part is the engagement. Now, being engaged with your child is if you have the conversation, right, talking to them, it's being engaged enough to follow up. Hey, so the first part of the plan was this. How did it go today? Right? Because a lot of times you make the plan and then you stop engaging with your kid. And a lot of times with parents, there's either 2 parts. There's like the over-engaged, where you have like the plan typed up on the fridge, step 1, step 2. And then there's the ones who are more checked out, who are like, cool, we had a plan, and then the weekend comes and you're like, oh, hey, how'd that conversation go? Right, so it's kind of meeting in the middle, and it depends on your child as well. Some children need a little bit more of a push, where the schedule may help. Again, this is why it comes down to self-awareness. Some kids will make their own schedule and tell you, Mom, here's your part. Right, so your child is your best teacher in how they need to be led. So just stay engaged with your child, especially when they're developing or they're going through something that seems like they might be having emotional or relational bullying. And then kids, also important for you to stay engaged with your parents and know that they're really ultimately looking out for you. All right, so now comes the important part. I always like to say, here's what's happening, here's what you can do as a parent, but why is this happening? Why is bullying continuing to happen even though we have all these awesome, what are they called, school assemblies, we have the KIND campaign that goes around to schools, kids know more about bullying. I didn't really know much about bullying when I was in school. I mean, maybe it just wasn't labeled as much, but it didn't happen in my school that I can remember. And now I feel like there's more awareness, but it's also happening more. Do you guys agree? It's like bullying. Like, can people just stop bullying? So any guesses on why bullying happens? Let's switch on this side. Yeah.
People are seeking attention.
Yeah. Do you guys hear that? Kids are teaching you. Bullies are seeking attention. Good one. Any other ideas of why bullying, especially with the relational bullying, happens? Mm-hmm.
They want a better reputation.
Yeah, definitely. So a lot of times reputation-wise in girls, which is what is seen in Mean Girls, it's about being popular. It's your social reputation. Guys, they call it Mean Girls and I think it's like brutal boys or something, that boys want to show that they're strong and they have power. And that comes from being like forceful, and girls showing they're strong and have power shows from their social status. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's jump into some reasons why. Here's the 4 main reasons what bullies feel and how they become bullies. Jealousy, comparison, insecurity, and fear. And I could spend the next 5 hours going through each of these and how it actually causes a bully to take action. The thing that I want you to walk away with is all these feelings are feelings that we feel every day. I feel jealous. I'm human. I compare myself. I have insecurities, definitely, and I have fears. The difference is I do not act on them to make myself feel better versus someone else. Does that make sense? So it's teaching your kids, hey, it's okay to feel jealous, but when you feel jealous and that leads you to starting a rumor, that's the difference. Does that make sense? That's the the big dun dun dun. Okay, when you act on these emotions, especially for girls, when you're having this fear that you're going to be left out, so in order to not be left out, I'm going to make sure that my lunch table only has 5 people and Mary Jo's left out, that's acting on that fear. Okay, comparison, huge one for girls. So you make someone feel less than you because you're comparing yourself, and in your mind, you're feeling less than. Right? And these are still emotions that you are going to feel your whole life. You will just learn how to navigate and deal with them in a healthier way. We are not having to put someone else down. That's really why bullying still happens. It's because kids are feeling these emotions and they don't know what to do with them. So without the frontal cortex and saying, I'm comparing myself and that's not a healthy thing, so I'm going to do this. As adults, we can do that. Kids will feel this and they just act because they want to feel better yesterday, right now. Okay, so this is your job as a parent to dig deeper. You can't control other parents and other kids and other bullies. It's going to happen. What you can control is how these feelings and emotions show up in your kid's life and what you can do to explain that to them. Your kid's not going to be perfect. They will feel and want to compare themselves. They will have fears. That's why you can empathize with them. Make them feel empowered. Hey, let's face this fear versus using this fear to put someone else down. Right? Hey, I know you're comparing yourself to the popular girl, but everyone has insecurities. Let me tell you about the popular girl in my school that ended up blah, 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 blah. Or use Mean Girls as an example. Has everyone seen Mean Girls? Regina George? Yeah? Every time I speak at schools, I play different clips and the girls love it. And it's not saying it's okay, but it's the most they can relate to it because they've actually seen it in a movie. Okay, so again, these emotions as a parent, this is your job with how to navigate. And then think of as a parent, how do you handle jealousy? Comparison, insecurity, and fear. How are you modeling this to your kids? Right? Kids will watch you more than they will listen. So again, just emphasizing, when you act on them, that's how bullying happens. Any questions on that? We will do Q&A at the end, but that's a big one. I saw yawning in the back. No yawning, Mom. I'm just kidding. Okay, so the result is what I just mentioned, Regina George in Mean Girls. So when girls or guys or anyone feels the feelings of jealousy, insecurity, fear, and comparison, and they act on them, that's when Mean Girls happens, right? Regina George was the ultimate mean girl, and yet in the movie you saw she was insecure. She needed girls to make her feel powerful. She was obsessed with her image, so she used her friends to boost her own image. She was the epitome of those emotions and how you don't deal with them. Okay, so traits of bullies. I'm going to go through these pretty quick. Impulsive, anger management problems. This is just as parents for you to look out for or for your own kids. Okay, we're not all going to sit here and say your kid's never going to be a bully because you saw how many things on those lists. Your daughter may at some point send a mean text, right? They're human. So just look out for these traits, and then now you have a reason to dig deeper into why. They try to control other people rather than inspiring others to follow. Regina George, example of that. She made them have outfits for what they could wear, right? Because that's going to make her feel more powerful. If you can control someone, it makes you feel powerful. Bullies can be easily frustrated and annoyed. They lack empathy, which was the first thing to do as a parent and to teach your kids. So they're really selfish-minded. They don't care how this is going to make someone else feel because it's all about them. They have difficulty following rules and little respect for authority. As parents, the rules that you set for your kid on what their behavior should be, that's your job. Every parent is different, so you set that expectation. If your child is having problems with authority or following rules, you need to address that, okay? Because that's going to have other effects in their life with school or when they're with other parents or kids. And again, kids can be smart, so they may, be nice to you, but look out for when they be mean or you see that side of them. And it's not saying they defy like standing up for what you believe in. That's not what I'm talking about. It's when you're really disrespecting authority. Boys who bully tend to be physically stronger than other children, so that does still exist, like the picture in the beginning where he's picking up the little boy. And girls who bully tend to be perceived as popular. Okay, doesn't mean if you're popular, I was popular in high school, I wasn't the most popular, but I was well liked. Doesn't mean I'm like, oh, does that mean I'm a bully? No, because I wasn't popular because I was using those emotions to make me popular. I was popular because I was being myself, I engaged in lots of different activities, and I was nice to people. That's really what I think. So again, if you're a girl, don't freak out being like, oh, I'm popular. Just think about how you're using your popularity.
Well, what's popular is different. I mean, it's not necessarily the kids that are the smartest kids that are
exactly.
involved in everything that are popular.
Yeah.
It's the kids that are going to the most parties.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So in that sense too, you have to, with your child, that's a teaching moment again to define popularity. And if that's what they feel like they need to do to be popular, then that's, a bigger issue as well. Because it's like, do you really want to go to all these parties and are you having fun or are you doing it just because you need to feel cool and you're comparing yourself? Again, all your kids are going to go through these emotions and go to the parties and learn that. It's just having that conversation and being really open about it. But yes, you're right. People who are doing the right thing are not always the most popular. Yes?
So the people that are letting the bully control them are having these same issues, right?
Yeah, so they're actively participating. Yeah, great question. So again, in Mean Girls, Regina George is the queen bee, and she has these little minions that she has do bullying for her. She's like the main bullier, but she's bullying these other girls, which are bullying other girls. They're just as guilty, right? So if you are in a friend group and you're afraid of one girl because you're like, oh, but she's the one who makes all the rules, you are considered to be a part of the bully group. And that's not a real friend if you are afraid of someone you're friends with. So yes, that's time to find new friends. All right, so let's talk solutions. Parents, big list here. Remember the 3 E's, that's really important. So you want to make sure as a parent you are modeling healthy behavior for your kids. I'm not asking you to be perfect parents, but I want you to think about how you live your life, how you handle conflict, how you speak to your friends. If you're involved in girl drama, your relationship with your partner, kids are picking up on that. That's really where they learn. They spend the most time at home. So not, again, feeling guilty for it, but seeing this as a chance to kind of, okay, how are we doing as parents when we handle conflict? What is our typical solution for that, right? And you can also, if your kids are older, you can ask them this as well. Hey, am I modeling a healthy behavior for you as a parent? Just ask them. Help the child discover strengths and weaknesses in his or own personality. So the more a child can recognize their actual strengths and weaknesses, it doesn't mean you're saying you're perfect, then they're automatically going to be able to recognize, hey, I'm not feeling like my strengths are coming out in this friendship. I'm actually feeling like my weaknesses are always coming out. So you're helping them teach or develop confidence in who they are versus just, like you said, being popular and going to parties. So if they're smart, play that up. They're a great piano player, keep playing the piano. Find people to play the piano with. But also recognize the weakness. Hey, you tend to be, you like people to like you, so that may show up as being a people pleaser, and sometimes you have to have a little bit more of a backbone. So it's okay to talk about weaknesses as well. Just recognize it and have the conversation, and you can even ask them, hey, Mary Jo, I'm just curious, what do you think your strengths are? Give them a chance. They will tell you what they think their strengths are. And what about your weaknesses? Okay, so it's just about having that conversation. Teach your children what bullying means. You can look up relational bullying on the internet and teach them it's not just about stealing someone's lunch money, it's more the relational and emotional bullying that we're focused on. So you can ask them, hey, this is what bullying means, just so you know. I don't want you to, not realize you're being bullied or not realize you're bullying somebody. Ask on a regular basis how the child's day went and if or she feels safe. Again, it's not like you're hovering, but engage in conversation that's more open-ended, or again, pay attention to the signs that I mentioned before if they're starting to not be engaged in school, not eating as much. So when you talk to them more on a day-to-day basis, you'll have more of a awareness of how they're feeling. Don't allow bullying at home. I mentioned this before. So most of the time this happens between siblings. I don't know if any of you guys have siblings that tend to, one has more power. Just notice how your kids interact and when they are in an argument, what they do to problem solve. A lot of that is learned. And again, you are the parent, so you get to decide what the behavior that is allowed in your home is. But just know that they're learning a lot of that from their relationships with their siblings. Define for the child what positive and negative friendship means. Okay, so very easy, like, hey, it seems like when you hang out with Sarah, you guys are always laughing and you feel so good about yourself. That seems like a great positive friendship, right? Help them recognize that for themselves. Oh yeah, you're right, I am really happy when I come home. And then same for negative. And then discipline the child if bullying is observed in the home. Okay, parents these days have a harder time with discipline. Again, there's that whole like friends with your kids. If you recognize that your child is doing any of the bullying list, that's a perfect chance if you nail it in the butt then and talk about, hey, I noticed this could easily lead to this. You could wipe out that situation from being down the road where they're really bullying somebody. Okay, so you have to also put your kid a little bit off the pedestal and see them as someone who needs you to be a parent to teach them. And then the 3 E's, like I said, so you're going to be empathetic, you're going to empower them to empower themselves with your support, and you're going to stay engaged. Okay, so this is your list as parents to take away. I know it's a long list, even if you just remember one thing, then you're making a change. Now here's the quote. Your child will follow your example, not your advice. They will follow your advice when they're older. They will be like, oh my gosh, my dad used to say that. He was so right. But for now, they're gonna follow your example, which can feel like a lot of pressure, but it's also this amazing opportunity because you get to continue to work on yourself as a parent, and that's a lifelong journey, and that should make you feel excited. Now for kids, to finish, be resilient and know that overcoming challenges will help you build your self-esteem. So you need to remind your kid when they stand up for themselves or when they make a change in their friend group, and it's not going to be easy, just like I talk about in my foundation with Grace by Grit, is that the hardest times in your life, those gritty moments, will make you grow the most, but they're not easy. But that's what you have to tell your kids, will help you grow that backbone, so next time it won't even be a question for you to stand up for yourself. Okay, so that overcoming a challenge is how they build confidence, because they can feel that they've experienced that, versus you telling them, be confident. It doesn't really make me feel confident to tell me to be confident. If I can say, I remember last year when I told that girl that's not nice, and that made me feel more confident, you can like feel that in your body because you were there experiencing it. Talk to someone. Okay, so as a kid, if you ever have a situation where you feel like you're being bullied, not just the physical type, most importantly the relational type, make sure you talk to your parents, you can talk to a teacher. I work with a lot of girls who are bullies in my practice or have been bullied, so coaching or therapy is great. A lot of times kids starting in middle school and high school distance themselves from their parents because they're trying to find their independence and identity. So having someone, maybe or even aunt, uncle, else in your life that they can talk to is really important. Learn how to be assertive. I think we talked about this a little bit. Teach your kids what that looks like. Doesn't mean bullying back. And they will learn that from you, most importantly. And remember, no one has control over what other people say or do. You do have control over your response. That's what you teach your kid, and kids really look at that. You can't sit there and brainstorm, how am I going to change Regina George? She's not changing. All you can do is control yourself. And in the movie, that's what ends up changing her. You guys remember? She ends up, she was even bullying the teachers. Remember that clip where they're like, how many of you guys have been bullied by Regina George? And the teachers are raising their hands. So, but just know, no one changed Regina George. She lost her power because people stopped giving it to her. Treat others the way you want to be treated. My dad said this to me all the time, and all I heard was blah, 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 blah. But this is real, and this is, as a parent, you have a chance to do this. You get to treat people how you want to be treated and model that to your kids. Okay, that puts responsibility on them too. Hey, Mary Jo, how are you treating your friends? It kind of sounds like you're mean sometimes. Sorry, Mary Jo's my example. She seems very mean. So that can be another learning moment, is treat others how you want to be treated. Old lesson, but still good. Learn how to deal with stress in a healthy way. So when the kids are feeling these emotions of jealousy, comparison, insecurity, how do you release the stress? What activities do you have them in that are helping them deal with their stress? Because they don't know what stress is. They just know what it feels like in their body, and then they have to get it out. So that's why sports, talking, writing, journaling, anything that helps them learn how to deal with stress in a healthy way is going to really benefit them long term. And then choose friends, girls, boys, well, I guess just girls for the younger girls. Choose friends that make you feel good about yourself, that you can be your true self with, right? Don't be friends with somebody that you feel like you have to be, perfect for, or if they're not going to like you. That's not what a true friend is. But also make sure you're being that friend that someone can be themselves with and someone can actually feel accepted with. You're not going to be friends with every single person. That's the good thing for girls to realize. And your friendships will change. That's normal. You will change. Your whole teenage years, you're changing and growing. But you don't have to be mean when you change. But that's what happens when you don't want to actually have that person-to-person talk, so you end up doing a roundabout way.